Welcome back to the Wolff Den, presented by Win Again Academy. I'm Matt Wolff, founder and CEO of Ticket Time Machine. Today we welcome Dr. John Sorflaten to the show. Welcome to the Den. How's it going?
Hey, Matt. Great to be here. I've been watching a couple of your episodes, and hey, I think you're a good conversationalist.
I appreciate that. Well, I'm looking forward to this conversation. For the people in the audience who don't know who you are, give us a quick intro, and then we'll get to it.
Sure. As we talked about when you set up the Chiron below, people watching a little thing going right to left down there. It says usability consultant and sci-fi author. So I want to share a little bit about that because they are connected. So you all use a computer, I presume. And how many times were you frustrated to say, well, I can't find that thing they want me to find, or I don't know where to click. So my job was as a psychologist was to make sure computer applications were easy to use. So that word usability means computer applications should be usable by regular people, not by experts. So what that means is large corporations really get a big bang for their buck when they spend money on usability consultants because their users, all their end users are saving time, less training, less frustration. So I apply that to our culture as a whole.
Okay.
I had enough experience with things being screwed up, if you know what I mean, to realize that, well, pretty much everything is screwed up when you think about it. And so my sci-fi novels are an attempt to unscrew things.
Okay, these are fiction,
And
obviously, sci-fi. You're a usability consultant. You're also a doctor. What came first?
yeah, the doctor part, I got a scholarship from Eastman Kodak, believe it or not. They're not in the film business anymore. But back then, when they were looking for people to create a new academic discipline. It's called visual studies, the role of visuals in learning, thinking, and communication. So I had a background in film. I produced films and documentaries and training for the military for a number of years. I was an officer in the military. And by the way, the Air Force paid my way through film school. So that was a double plus.
Yeah.
And so that background plus my other background is in, I've done a lot of meditation in my life. I think that really piqued the interest of the guy looking through all the applications. I wrote an essay, said, I would like to do research on what it means to be a seer, SEER. You've heard of that. I was curious myself. I wonder what that would be. So I think that's how I got in the program. I got a PhD. And then as a consultant, as you can imagine, it's pretty cool to have a PhD. Nobody asked me what was in, but I scraped through and had a 30-year career. It was fun.
And then you decided to write a book.
Exactly. I don't know. I'm sure everybody thinks about, gee, what kind of novel I could write. And for me, my wife loved the Dan Brown novels, the Da Vinci Code and I can't remember the other titles right now, but
I'm not a big book reader. Full disclosure, I read that book. I think in maybe few sittings. There was a hurricane.
Oh my God!
In Florida, and there was nothing else to do, and I went right through that book. I thought it was very engaging and just a great book.
It was. Dan Brown. He has a certain brilliance about him. So, would you agree that it was all based on riddles? Plot point A, what's the riddle here? Plot point B, what's the riddle? So
yeah.
I came up with a riddle, and I'll try it on you. Let's see what you think. So here's the deal. A guy, he's 61 years old. His mom is just in a bad automobile accident. She's in the hospital. She's gonna die. She says, "Oh, my son, I'm so sorry I couldn't tell you the secrets of my life, but because of government secrecy. But now I can tell you. Your destiny is to save the world." Well, that's point number one. Point number two, and I want you to know that you were born out of time. You were born out of time. And then she, of course, dies. So that's the riddle. So how can somebody be born out of time? I had to ask myself that question because that was the riddle that came to mind. And I came up with an answer, unless you want to try first.
No, I mean the answer is the book, right?
Oh yeah, well, you got to read the book. So I'm gonna tell your audience here, because it's sort of cool when you think about it. There's two places on Earth where all the time zones converge. There's 24 time zones. Each one is an hour apart, and because it takes an hour for the Earth to rotate that much. But so wait a minute. When you're standing right on the North Pole, all the time zones are exactly the same. So what time is it? You got 15 seconds to answer for $64,000.
What time is it?
Yeah,
There is no time, I guess. I don't know.
there is no time. Yeah, so yes, so so that was the answer. North Pole and South Pole, there is no time, unless you want to, adopt a convention. So then the next question is, well, how in the world somebody's going to get born up there, right? You were born out of time. So at that time, I was working for the National Security Agency in Columbia, Maryland, and I was a contractor there. And my wife and I, we were visiting the Cyber Museum, which one of they had established there, the Cyber Museum. And I got to thinking about the nuclear submarine Nautilus. I don't know if you ever heard about that, but back in Eisenhower era, that's when Sputnik came up. The Russians blasted
Yeah.
Sputnik into orbit, and well, that was very embarrassing to the United States. Oh, well, why was it embarrassing? Because we were in the last row from technology. We couldn't get our own rocket ships up, right? So President Eisenhower had a big public relations problem on his hands, international. We were showing up to be dimwits. So he said, well, wait a minute, we got an ace in the hole. We got a nuclear sub. What can we do with that? Well, he said, well, we can send it over the North Pole. That'll teach the Russians a thing or two. Why is that? Well, that North Pole is not too far from Moscow.
Yeah.
And the missiles they had, they could send it to Moscow at will. All they had to do is be able to pop up out of the ice and blast off a missile. So it turns out that August 23rd, 1958, the submarine Nautilus did go over the North Pole for real. So in my head, all I had to do was have a woman on there who joined the ship's crew in Hawaii. Maybe I think it was like 4 weeks earlier, and ride with them up there. So in my story, it turns out Eisenhower wanted to add a little twist, saying, yeah, how did the Russians get all that secret rocket knowledge? I think they were using ESP. Now, by the way, that is a whole story for real. Let me tell you, the CIA actually planted stories. This is for real. The CIA did plant for stories about extrasensory perception being used by the United States. This is documented on the web. People can look it up. And they wanted the Russians to get scared about that and then spend a ton of money researching ESP. Well, of course, we're on a digression now, but I'm going to finish that digression right now. The Russians did spend a ton of money on it. And actually, about 10 years later, the United States got scared, thinking the Russians knew more about extrasensory perceptions than the Americans. So then the Americans started spending money. So there you go.
So your book, while it's science fiction, is also sort of based in the reality of things that were going on in the world.
Well, yeah, that's the case. And so it's a blending. I guess some people would call it historical fiction, right? I don't know what the genre is. And that's a little bit what Dan Brown was doing that, the stories about Washington, D.C. and the Masons designing the streets, all that good stuff.
You think that's
but the fictional part.
Do you think that's easier to maybe write than having to create a whole world and everything that isn't true, that you sort of have to imagine everything?
Well, that's a good question. I think it's an either or thing. It's a technique. Fictional history, Philip K. Dick, he's quite a famous sci-fi writer. he created an alternative history. Alternative history was, well, what if Germany won World War II? And he created the
Yeah,
whole
that
scenario of
was the man in the castle.
Japan having won half the U.S. Yeah, I think that was it. That was it. What you remind me? Japan had half the country, and Germany had the other half, something like
I didn't
that,
watch it. I
in the
think I
United States.
supported or wanted to, but I think that stuff is very interesting. The what ifs in
Isn't
the
it? It's
history,
fascinating.
and it's like just it's a you say in
Mhm.
sports it's a game of inches. The world is it's a matter of seconds that could change the trajectory of people's lives, but also the trajectory of the world.
Well, you got it. You put your finger on it, and that's part of what my novel is about in terms of the theme. The theme, this is a fun discussion. Do we live in a conspiracy-laden world right now?
Yeah. Well,
And where does that
I
come
think
from?
there's a lot of conspiracy theories out there, but isn't there's a difference between people who are conspiracy theorists who have all this stuff, maybe a non-trust of whatever's going on, and then other people who have conspiracy theories that maybe might be more well thought out and say, well, how
Agreed.
could this have been?
Agreed. I'll make a true confession here on your show for the first time. 9/11 sounds fishy to me. How those
Really?
buildings could come crashing down, kerchunk, 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 you know, and
But that's a weird. I
so
mean, that's what it. I understand people thinking a certain way, but then you got to think like, well, so then what happened?
yeah, exactly, exactly. So, so we are faced with sort of a fork in the road in our culture. Some conspiracies might have basis in fact. Other conspiracies are total fiction. And in a way, my book is about that. The question is, how far can people go down a rabbit hole and not come up? And and the book is sort of an example of letting people go down a rabbit hole, and then at the end, on one of my blurbs for the book, it says, "And the end." So by the way, the hero and the heroine they're identical twins, and we'll
Okay,
get to that because I heard that you're a twin,
I
Matt.
am a
Is that
twin. I have
true?
fraternal.
Yeah,
It's fraternal.
yeah,
Both.
yeah. So I want to hear about that. So anyway, so the identical twins, they have superpowers because they were born at the North Pole under very special circumstances, and then the surprise. So that's how the blurb works. And
So you're leading them
so
down the rabbit hole.
uh,
You're leading the reader down the rabbit hole.
I'm leading the reader down the rabbit hole, which is what Dan Brown does. Every science fiction author does. Uh, and in fact, here's the ultimate rabbit hole. Robert Heinlein wrote a book called Childhood's End. Maybe you've heard about it. It turned into a series that had I think it had 3 episodes. That was it on a series, Childhood's End. And it was about this race of interstellar travelers. They would carry out the wishes of another entity, a vast entity who was very wise. They would carry out the entity's wishes. And so when they came to humanity, um, they brought peace, and they said, "We're going to give you peace for 50 years." And and they, unfortunately, these characters that were going to give humanity peace did have a bad look to them. They actually looked like they had two cloven feet, and they were sort of red, and they sort of had horns up here, which of course looks like our standard cultural image of Satan. But that said, people got accustomed to the benefits of, well, world peace. We're bringing technical solutions to a lot of things. People had to work less. They were getting along with each other. And the children that were being born during that time were bright, cheerful, and well adjusted. Oh my gosh, that's pretty cool. But at the end of the 50 years, the deal was closed. And then these creatures said, "Well, thank you very much, humans. And now we're going to call it quits on the human race." and all the children ascended up into the sky, and these creatures says, well, we're going to pull the plug on humanity. Everything is going to crash, which it did. So now
This was
my
a movie
question,
or a book and movie?
it was a book and a series, a short series on TV. I think it's on Netflix. But the point is, who is going to read that novel if humanity is gone? That's the question that came in my mind. Who's reading the friggin' novel?
Yeah, that's a
Because
good question.
the novelist erased humanity.
And then there's got to be something else out there, which certainly
Something
there's
else out there.
no shortage of stories. But it's interesting, like I'm a big M. Night Shyamalan fan, and he took a lot of flack in one of his movies when he introduced aliens, out otherworld creatures. It's interesting what people have this perception of what these creatures should look like, and you have illustrated, and you told me about your son, which you could talk about, but he illustrated stuff from the book, and that sort of is the vision of science. It's a science fiction. It's not reality, right? It's science fiction, and how he envisioned it, and how you guys envisioned it.
That, to me, that was an example of could I call it ESP, extrasensory perception? I would call it synchronicity. Yeah, my son, he didn't talk between the years of 2002 and 2012. He had a brain problem. And I'll just say it to the audience. He had too much LSD. Somebody gave it to him on the side, and it flipped him out, which is pretty tough. But he recovered, started talking, writing notes and things in 2012. And among those notes were illustrations. So I made a calendar for 2024 out of them. I'm going to do it again for 2025. But you can see that's an interesting illustration, isn't it? You can see that head sort of crying out, and the other little eyes. It's sort of like a lot of visual puns in there.
Yeah.
Where every element plays two roles. It's, on the one hand, it's part of the drawing, but on the other hand, it's part of some human feature. So there is so he did that between the years of 2012 and 14. I didn't write these books until 4 years ago in terms of even starting. And so I'm going to read you the caption. I found a passage in the book within, it's up to page 4, right at the beginning. The caption is, "Who is she? He would often wonder about a recurring vision of some mysterious woman." So that passage in the book actually fits the illustration pretty good. That mysterious woman is that head, at the top with a little antenna. And amazingly enough, there's 20 illustrations for which I was able to match a passage, and they fit quite reasonably with these strange pictures. I thought that's an amazing coincidence, I felt.
Yeah.
People can have their various opinions, but I was quite happy about that.
This is a book. This is a book. It's science fiction. You talk about the main characters having some superhuman powers. Is there anything else in the environment that screams science fiction, or is that it?
Well, yeah, very good point. And so this is the book. It's about 400 pages, but it's fast reading. I designed it to be short chapters. We have 66 chapters, about 5 pages each. And the reason for that is I meant it to be a movie. And the idea is that, because I have a film background, and how do you reach movie producers? Most scripts get rejected. Automatically. I had a buddy of mine who was a script reader at Columbia back in the old days, and he said his job is to say no. They all get rejected, basically. So I wanted to publish a book and then get some avenues to reach producers that way. So what that means is that we have a hero and heroine that were born on a submarine under circumstances where radiation from a flying saucer that was being lowered to the North Pole under President Eisenhower's command. That flying saucer came from Roswell, of course. We're connecting more with history here, and all your fans who are into the UFO world probably themselves have a conspiracy theory that indeed there's flying saucers still under wraps by the military.
The
And,
drones in New Jersey brought up a lot of that up, right?
Well, exactly. And even in, what was it, 2023, there was congressional testimony. There was a guy who was a whistleblower, basically, who had worked really hard with the record keeping process by the military, keeping track of all the UFO sightings and reports. And he showed Congress reports and videos that were taken by fighter pilots who actually saw flying objects that were doing acrobatics that no human device could ever do. So it's out on the table. If I recall correctly, Congress passed a law that says, hey, guys, you can't hide this information anymore. The theory was, another conspiracy theory, but it could well be true. Contractors had all that information about new materials and new devices from flying saucers, and they were keeping it down in the rabbit hole because they could invent devices and materials based on that technology and then make money on it. So coming back to the story.
Oh, so I forgot, who was it who said that we'd have to be so arrogant to think that there's no other life on this planet?
Yes, exactly. That is the Fermi paradox. He's the Fermi paradox. He was an atomic physicist, especially during World War II. He was one of the leaders of the Manhattan Project, inventing the atom bomb. So he was saying the paradox is really, why haven't we been contacted already by alien life forms? Because the probability of other planets, there you go.
Yeah, so Brent says our technology is decades further in advancement than we're aware.
And that is absolutely true. When I worked at NSA, obviously our defense industry needs to be ahead of the curve compared to commercial products, because defense means bigger, better, faster, and cheaper, and they keep that under wraps in order to maintain a defensive advantage.
But you worked at the NSA. How much are you allowed to talk about?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, it's very difficult to shoot you, so I better be careful what I say. As the phrase goes, I can't tell you because I'll have to shoot you, but I can tell you a little bit, and that is, everybody, is very patriotic. Everybody knows they're doing a job to defend the country, and a national security agency is the eyes and ears of our culture into other cultures. That's their mission. So they got to listen, they got to watch and make sense out of what's going on elsewhere. And they do a good job of that through technology. So I can tell you that. I can also tell you that everyone's very serious about their job. They're not sitting around, screwing around, wasting money. I can tell you that, in contradiction to some other political people who might tell you that.
And one of my favorite science fiction movies is Men in Black. And there's a great scene when Tommy Lee is talking to Will, and he's trying to understand why the big secret. And he says, people are dumb and scared. I forget exactly what the quote is, but do you think there's some truth to that the government hides some of this stuff because the world wouldn't really know what to do with that information and might misuse it?
I wasn't in the position to see that, but I think it's a very reasonable statement, don't you? And when you're talking about, yeah, I mean, when you think about defense, we're in a technology world. So my technology is bigger and better than your technology. What else are you going to do?
I think people don't really care how everything gets done. They just want to know that they're safe. And
exactly.
You don't really want to know the truth of how things need to get done because the world is a scary place with scary people, and there's a lot of stuff that has to be done that you really don't you really don't want to.
Yeah, yeah. And, in my observation, and this is known, politically, the way this stuff gets done is that the government supports private industry. And so they want private industry to come up with these ideas because you have a lot better options. The competition is useful. Private industry competes with each other. So the best and brightest get a chance to show their stuff.
Yeah. So you write. Let's get back to the book. You write this book. Yeah. Spoiler alert: there's a second book. They're related. Related story, continued story. I mean, obviously, I don't want to ruin for people.
Yeah. I took a page from George Lucas. By the way, George was in the same film school program I was in. He was just 1 year ahead of me. And
USC, right?
University of Southern California, yeah. And he was a famous student even then. At the time I was there, he was in the master's degree program. He had finished his bachelor's degree program in cinema, done a great job. And so he had access to some of my fellow military people. I was being sent to the University of Southern California by the military, the Air Force. And George, if I may use the phrase, glommed on to the Navy cameramen because they had access to the great Navy cameras and all the film that they could scrounge up, which was a lot. So George was very smart and a good manager using those Navy guys.
Star Wars is the greatest science fiction movies.
I'll put my name on that list. It was a breakthrough event, and the philosophy of it was incredible. And he had made 6 movies out of it, and more were made by other people. It was a watershed. It was a cultural watershed. And how much of that?
Yeah, go ahead. You were talking.
Oh, how much of that is showing up today in our culture?
Yeah,
it's Emperor Palpatine.
As an author or a director or creator, to have your work live on. We talk about look at what's going on with Superman, right? I mean, and Spider-Man. It's a lot of different variations, but the same premise, and it's all because of how good the original was and the storyline was, that people just keep wanting more. I think that's a little bit different than maybe the Marvel stuff that I don't know, that I watch a lot of it, but there's just a lot of offshoots. But there's something about Batman and Spider-Man and Superman and Star Wars that, just people keep wanting more and more of it.
Well, you're right. Absolutely right. And that's what fascinates me too. And elements show up in my book. What's happening is that the inner psychology is being projected out into the real world. So, well, what's the inner psychology? How many people have a dream that they're flying, or have a dream that they're walking through walls, or have a dream that they have a superpower? So now that film technology, and it's always been the case with film technology, you can make magic happen. Even in the early days of film, that was a big deal. People loved it. Seeing magical things transformed right before your eyes, because, well, you just stop the camera, change a few things, start the camera again.
Yeah.
And so here we are. We're watching. Even there's a company called DreamWorks.
Yeah.
As you know, what more would you want to prove the point that we're allowing the subjective realm to be projected into our reality? And this has deep psychological meaning. In what sense? And that is, our culture actually permits it. Isn't that interesting? It permits us to talk about our deep psychological desires for invincibility, let's say, or for superpowers, and to battle out the issues and aggressions and fears that we have psychologically in these other toy characters. You can call them that, toy characters.
Yeah. What superpower would you choose?
That's where we're at. Sorry?
What superpower would you choose if you could have any?
Yeah, that's a good one. Well, in my book, the team, the twins have the superpowers of anything that they could want. They could levitate, they could move things, they could mentally control things. And I just have to say, by the way, my grandmother, my dad's mom, she was a mentalist. She practiced ESP on the stage in the 20s and the 30s. She was on radio. And by the way, did you know radio was characterized in the press as mental telepathy?
Yeah.
Or and mental telepathy acts. They would say, "Well, you've seen the radio, folks. It works by waves going across the air, and that's how telepathy works." And so people could do that,
We
have
had Wayne
performances for
Hoffman.
mental telepathy.
We had Wayne Hoffman on the show. You should watch. It was an early episode, and he is a mentalist, and it's just blew my mind the stuff that he was able to do. So that's a pretty good superpower that people do have. However they do it, I don't know, but that's a pretty good superpower to have.
Well,
So
even the government was paying for that stuff between 1973 and 1995. There was the remote viewing program. You probably had some guests who might have mentioned at some point. But it started out with the Defense Intelligence Agency of the Army, and it was run by the Rand corporations. And so what they did, they used a lot of civilians, but some actual Army guys, and they would train them in forms of meditation. And they would actually use techniques written about, a couple thousand years ago by this guy named Patanjali, and he wrote this book called Yoga Sutras. And one of the big names in remote viewing is Ingo Swann. Basically, he was just lifting out the techniques from the Yoga Sutras on seeing things at a distance, and then teaching these Army guys how to go into a deep state of meditation and learn how to let their imagination run free, rather than, we all have the tendency to want to edit our imagination. Well, it's a technique to let it work free. And so the question is, well, my God, how did Congress fund this year after year after year? Well, the story is they would invite the senators in for a demonstration. And when the senators walked out, they said, we're going to fund this, because they could describe things that were happening in hidden areas, like in Russia, finding out about nuclear submarines and construction facilities. Those that's just an example. That aircraft, the U-2 couldn't see. Later on, things that the satellites couldn't see. But these remote viewers were more than 50% accurate, which was enough to allow Congress to fund them, up until 1995, when the CIA took over, and the CIA says, hey, we ain't going to associate our name with it, and so they cut it out. So what we're saying is, even these superpowers even were funded by the government.
Where'd you get the inspiration or the motivation or direction for writing this book? Is it, how much of it was your time in the military? How much of it was time at the NSA? How much of it was sort of getting your doctorate and the work that you've done?
Well, that's a good question. I should sit down and answer it myself. It's a good question. I think it's a combination. What happens was, I started going down rabbit holes reading about remote viewing. Actually, my first contractor, I was employed by Science Applications International Corporation, SAIC. I found out later that was the last contractor that supervised the remote viewing contracts for whatever, 6 or 8 years. And that was during the CIA period. And I think I won't get in trouble. When I was in the SAIC building, I looked up the name of the guy who ran it on the computers there, but nothing came up. And
Yeah.
I also did a search on remote viewing, and nothing came up. So what does that mean? I don't know. So this was
Yeah.
back in 2011 or so. So
You,
to make a long story short, I do think that all the inspirations for this book were manifold, just by an interest in the what's the next phase of human development. Maybe that's the easy way. Uh, I do transcendental meditation. I do the advanced program of transcendental meditation, which is based on the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras. And so I'm doing those techniques day after day after day. I'm keep waiting for a dramatic demonstration, and maybe people have heard about yogic levitation. You can go on YouTube and see examples of it from different groups. It looks like hopping, but it feels quite different. And I'm a firm believer that there is more to our human capabilities than what we're seeing now. So it's like if you want to check out how physics really works, you put a couple $1 billion into designing a large hadron collider, which they have in Geneva, Switzerland, and you smash a few atoms together, and you find something out about reality. And that's what people are doing now with these advanced programs using the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras.
well, technology and just life in general is way different now than it was in the 50s. That's where your story started. What era is it in the second novel?
Yeah, so the second novel, I followed George Lucas's pattern of prequel. That was exciting, right? To learn about the early years of Darth Vader when he was called Anakin, and that got me excited. So the first book started with the twins at age 61, and the book says they look 23. But so the second book actually was their actual circumstances of their birth. How their mom was recruited to go on the submarine, and how the mom discovered after the twins were born that weird things were happening on the submarine when the twins were together, and tended to focus on the same thing. And then as she and her husband raised the twins, they decided that they couldn't tolerate the actual destructive things that were happening when the twins were together. When they put their attention on the same thing, destructive things would happen, which is not good, meaning that their superpowers were magnified when they were together. So they separated the twins. The mom took the boy and the dad took the girl. Meanwhile, the parents were trying to train them in martial arts and other mental disciplines so that good things would happen when they came together. So they would bring them together secretly under conditions where the kids didn't know the other one was there, and tested them out. And then, of course, the Act 3, the grand ending of the whole novel, is when they actually have to save the world from the bad aliens who happen to look like humans. And the bad aliens, of course, are stressing out humans so that humans deny global warming. And if you deny global warming, what else is going to happen? But the low-lying cities are going to get flooded, and then mass chaos occurs. So anyway, the twins have to save the world and by undoing all that stress.
Brent has twin girls. They're identical, and I can concur. They are destructive, but probably easier for you to separate a male and a female than two males or two females, maybe that look alike, right? I mean, it feels like an easier way to do that without anyone figuring out.
That's a biological question. A lot of people ask me, well, wait a minute, they're identical twins. How can they be male and female? Guess what? It's possible. What happens is that the Y chromosome creates a male. So you have an XY matched pair. Well, what happens is that the Y chromosome can drop off, and that early cellular form of the twin comes out a female. because that ends up to be either a single X or a double X for some other strange reason. So anyway, that's a biological fact. You can have a male and female identical twins.
Are you working on a third novel?
Yeah. I want to let the dust settle on these first two novels, but I do think there's a future as to what the efforts that the twins are doing. And we're seeing it sort of play out even now in our political realm, and in terms of how our public is experiencing a change. Big change is going on, and there's many ways to interpret it. In some ways, it's going to be good change. In other ways, it might be destructive change. If you want to turn water into gas or water into vapor, you got to boil it. And we're in the boil phase right now. And water is good and water vapor is good. When you're in the boiling phase, it may not be too interesting. But so the third novel is in the pot, so to speak. But I will say I have a nonfiction book that's all drafted. I'm just putting the final touches on it. And it's a nonfiction book, though. It has. Can I do a marketing study with you on the title?
Sure.
You ready? Okay, here you go. Damn luck, damn lucky, quantum methods for living beyond life's probabilities.
I don't know.
How does that strike you?
It sounds interesting, but I don't know. I'd have to know more. I might not be the best person to give advice on the title, that sort of thing. But yeah, it's a good question for sure.
Does it lead you to question the role of luck in life? Damn luck or damn lucky. In both cases.
Yeah, I think luck. There's a lot of stuff that involves luck, but luck will only get you somewhere. Then you have to, a lot of times, what do you do with that? Luck, or I don't know.
Exactly.
Destiny, is luck the same as destiny, or Brent likes the back end of that title. So there you go.
Yeah, quantum methods for living beyond life's probabilities. The fact is, when you have good luck, we have a dopamine reaction. Oh, I feel good. I'm going to do that again. Well, what does that lead to? A gambling addiction in the worst case, which is not so good because it's a dopamine. It's a chemical hit on the body. So what about bad luck? Well, that's when you go ahead.
No, I was going to say it's interesting. The word luck and being lucky is that there is good and bad. Exactly.
And so the question is, maybe there's a better concept than luck, which is more constructive, and that's what the book is about. Because good luck is sort of like a dopamine up. Bad luck, our body generates stress hormones. It's called cortisol. That's a downer. So, in fact, just for fun, I put that title into ChatGPT and says, "Oh yeah, please give me a book cover based on this title." I think I put a paragraph in too, and it generated a roller coaster in an amusement park. The ups and downs of luck, and that's really what we would like to go beyond the ups and downs. So there is a different concept of life's probabilities that is very constructive, actually. And that word has been studied for quite a bit, not only in psychology, but also in quantum mechanics, amazingly enough. The word is synchronicity. Maybe you've heard that, synchronicity. Yeah. And it has to do with coincidences, right? So
there's a good movie called Synchronicity that was out on, it was one of the streaming platforms. I'll have to tell you what it is.
Yeah. There are people talking about it. It's quite amazing. The people talk. So it's coincidence, but wait a minute. You can have a coincidence. So, the bird flew into my windshield. That's pretty hard on the bird. That's a coincidence, but it has no meaning to us, right? But what if that bird flew into my windshield, caused me to put my brake on before I got to the intersection where this giant truck was coming through, and it would have killed me if the truck had come through. See the difference?
Yeah. Is there any? This
So
is a
that's a
rental like this.
meaningful.
We're big Seinfeld fans. Is there such a thing as a big coincidence or a huge coincidence, or are they all? They're all just coincidences.
Yeah, you're right. I think a big coincidence is one of these synchronicities. That's a big coincidence. It's a very meaningful thing. So there you go, the infinite number of deliberate events that precede any instant of luck. Yeah, but where did those other incidences come from? They came from some chance encounter as well.
Yeah,
And
it's an interesting topic.
so synchronicity. I'm sorry.
No, it's an interesting topic. I think anytime you have
Well,
stuff that doesn't really have an answer, it's like a movie that ends and it lets you kind of decide. It could have gone this way, it could have gone that way. There's some reasoning why this happens. There's some reasoning why that. You could come up with a lot of different theories.
so this is beautiful conversation because we're going in the right direction. The fact, so you just imagine you've had a wonderful synchronicity event. Wonderful meaning it worked out for you. But wait a minute, you didn't do anything, did you? The fact that the bird hit your windshield, you didn't cause that. The fact you slammed your foot on the brake, well, that's a natural reaction. But wait a minute, the fact that that giant garbage truck was coming through the intersection and it would have killed you if you had driven further, right? That's a total chance thing. So chance saved you from another chance thing, but you didn't do anything about it, right? So let's think about this roller coaster metaphor I had before. Good luck is up, bad luck is down. Are you going to experience any up or down right at that moment? The answer is no. And this is the main point of my book. The answer is no, you're not going to experience any up or down. You're just going to experience gratitude for life itself. Now, that is a wonderful feeling. That is a wonderful feeling. That is
We
the
should look at
feeling
that more
of,
often because there's so many things that could happen in this world that would end us or end someone or that could be bad. That just doesn't happen. But we don't walk around with gratitude.
well, agreed. And I'm just using that to make a point.
Yeah, I get it.
But the fact is, we're now separating ourselves from the idea of good luck and bad luck. Does that make sense?
Yeah, say if I didn't have bad luck, I wouldn't have any luck at all. That's what I think was what my grandma used to say. Or I don't know what. But
I thought I was so smart and bright, thinking, well, synchronicity it sort of separates you as being the doer. Now, I've been reading a lot of literature. Remember, I told you I was practicing Patanjali's Yoga Sutra stuff as a regular meditator, and so I'm interested in what enlightenment means, and people have written about that. There's a word to describe this state of enlightenment. It means there is no separation between you and the reality surrounding you, all of nature, all of events. Well, that's a pretty mysterious experience when you think about what is it. I'm not sure I could identify that experience. Does that make sense as a question? What does that mean, non-dual? It means everything is one. So we've all heard that. Everything is one. And so what is an experience that sort of illustrates everything as one? Well, actually, psychologists have gone into that realm very innocently. They've talked about, for example, peak experiences. Maybe you've heard about that. Abraham Maslow identified this back in the 70s. He said, people who are highly functioning, they don't think about themselves. They're involved in their task. They lose track of time. It's sort of like a peak experience. And then other people have written about flow. Maybe you've heard of the flow, or sports. I'm sure you've heard of this, being in the zone. Yeah. So I'm interested in how you've heard about being in the zone. What is that experience like?
It's just the sports. It's almost like you could do none wrong. It's the peak performance is exactly what you're saying. How you describe it.
Exactly. I have a buddy. He was a champion gymnast, and I was just talking to him a couple of days ago on this topic, and he says, "Yeah, John, you know, when you're doing your moves, you can't think. If you're thinking, dude, you're dead, basically, as a gymnast, because it's dangerous out there, and you have to learn just to, you know, do it." And so that's what being in the zone is. So
Yeah.
synchronicity is very similar. It's like saying, wait a minute, all this stuff is happening. Stuff is because it's meaningful, right? But I am not doing it. So I'm going to ask you, does that make sense? I am
There's
not
a lot
doing
of
it.
stuff that's going on that we don't have any thing to
Well,
do with.
agreed.
It still happens around us, from us, you know.
Yeah, exactly. And then, you know, but of course we're interacting, you know, with the stuff around us.
Sure.
And so to be honest, when you think about the history of meditation, and I'm a firm believer in this, when kings had their warriors go up against the other guys with their swords, you know, and battle axes, I think kings would be very concerned about how brave their warriors are. I think that's a very reasonable thing. I'd be
Didn't they have
worried.
to hypnotize them? I mean, who in their right mind would go out and do that?
Yeah, exactly. You got it. You got it. So I think kings, you know, had the priestly caste around to teach their warriors how to meditate, so that they would have this sense of non-duality. That yeah, their actions um, are such that they could do it by being in the zone, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
They're in the zone. They're just doing their thing, man. They're just not scared. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly.
And how else can you do it? And then now let's going to reverse this thing. Think about all the subjects of the king. You know, oh yeah, my king, I want to make sure he's doing the thing because our country is going to, you know, fry or succeed based on how well the king does. Should the subjects be concerned if whether the king is in the zone or not?
I don't know that it matters, but
Well, we would hope the king
depends
is
on
in
how
the
much
zone.
directive he's given. That's a king is different than, say, the commander of the army or armed forces. Like whoever was giving you command isn't really the king. It's
Yeah, well,
there's
very
a
good
lot of
point.
levels underneath the king.
Yeah, very good point. There's a lot of levels, but the king is the one who says, "Yeah, today we're going to fight," because he has his
Yeah,
advisors, right?
yeah.
He has all kinds, and some advisors are saying, "Yeah, let's go fight." Other advisors are saying, "No, we don't." But the king, the buck stops here, as President Truman says.
Would
So
you
the king
join
has to have a
the
cool mind.
would you join the armed
I'm sorry.
forces in today's environment today
Yeah,
if
I
you had a
did.
choice? You did
Oh,
it
would
back in
I?
the day. Would you if you
Yeah.
were young of that age and would you do it again in
Uh,
today's environment with the way things are? Because
uh,
you might have had your reasons why, and it's a different world back then than it is now. Would you go in again right now, knowing everything that you know about what's going on?
I think so. I think so. And in fact, I have a granddaughter, and I've been gently suggesting her to think about joining the Space Force.
Okay,
uh, Space Force is pretty cool. Uh, Maybe they'll
it
go to
sounds
Mars
cool.
someday. But pardon?
It sounds cool. It sounds like a cool thing.
That's cool. Well,
We'll
the
see what
fact
they
is,
come up with.
military, they're honorable, you know, honorable people. That's how they select them. And then a lot of responsibility. If you're an officer or enlisted, you're getting tremendous responsibility. And people tend to grow up really fast. And the Air Force is actually, or the military in general, is very careful to recruit people with character.
Yeah, I can
They
never
do
imagine
background checks.
there being a draft for that. Can you imagine
Yeah,
people fighting who don't want to fight and don't want to be there? People fault Trump about all of that. I don't fault someone for not wanting to go into the army. I really don't. I think it takes a certain type of person, and if we're someone who wants to be protected by these people, I wouldn't want someone who wasn't all in on that because that
that's
puts
very
people's
reasonable.
lives in dangers.
Yeah, that's very reasonable. That's so not having a draft means you have professional armed services,
Yeah,
and
sure.
that's what we want in any area. So I would agree with you.
Yeah.
So uh, so in terms of the book, both novels have this thread of showing how imagination has a positive side, but it also has a negative side. Conspiracy theories, is the word conspiracy tends to have a negative connotation. But just as an aside, and I'd like to comment on this, would you say that if you watch any TV shows that are except Saturday Night Live and other comedy, or romantic comedy, or musical, most dramatic TV shows have some element of conspiracy, where you have the bad guy basically is covering something up so they can get away with their bad things, and the cop has to find out
But
the
these
solution.
are right. So that's the difference between a conspiracy theory and something that's going to be found out or solved, a mystery that's solved. These conspiracy theories, a lot are based on things that can't ever be solved, most likely, or won't ever be solved.
So I think you have the makings of an author there, Matt. Yeah, that's right.
What
And
yeah, would you mentioned something about a movie. If you make this into a movie, or is it something you still have in mind?
yeah, that's my goal. So basically, I got it into print just in order to have some producers accidentally bump into my book and say this would make a great movie.
Who's playing the twins?
Yeah,
I
looked it up. I figured it out.
It's going today. Who you casting for the twins today?
So I'm going to take you down memory lane. Did you watch the movie The Matrix at all?
Yeah.
The Matrix. It's an alternate reality. The guy who played the Merovingian, in other words, he was the big controller guy. He sort of had a French accent, and so Neo and Trinity go meet him at sort of a dinner party, and so the Merovingian is saying, I got your number. I can shut you guys down anytime I want because I'm in charge of the whole program here. So that actor, it turns out, he was actually born on August 23rd, 1958, the same day that the Nautilus passed over the North Pole.
Okay.
And I think he'd be great for the male twin, the hero.
Female?
The female, I haven't identified anybody with the correct birthday yet, but there's a lot of candidates.
That's a harder thing to have a female that's sort of a superhuman power that could do some action. That's a little bit older, right?
Yeah.
Demi
I
Moore.
think so.
How about
But
Demi Moore?
Tammy Moore?
Demi Moore. You know
I'm
Demi
not
Moore?
familiar with that.
Demi Moore.
I'm sorry.
G.I. Jane. Bruce Willis.
G.I. Jane. I'm sorry. I'm just drawing a blank on that. I should be more familiar. But maybe I'll look her up after the show.
Yeah.
She might
Who's
be cool.
your favorite science fiction character in a movie? Let's say in a movie or a book.
Well, Back to the Future. The guy who plays the mad scientist, who invents the car that goes into the future and into the past.
It's one of my favorite movies of all time, Back to the Future.
It was the right place at the right time, and the right actor, Michael.
I always ask
this
question.
Last name in a minute.
You're talking about Christopher Lloyd?
Mike Fox.
Michael J. Fox and Christopher Lloyd.
Christopher Floyd. There you go. Yep.
Yeah, he's the one who you were talking about.
So it was a great team. And I love Christopher Floyd. If you watch Star Trek at all, and they have different Klingons at different times, when the other Klingons show up on the show, guess what? Christopher Floyd is one of those other Klingons most of the time.
Oh yeah, I don't know if
you have to see through all the makeup and all the prostheses that they have but
with
Christopher Floyd is in that Klingon outfit.
with all the technology that advancements that we've had, I've always thought that we would be a lot more closer to the Jetsons and Back to the Future 2 than we kind of are. Does that surprise you at all? That because so we're getting close, but obviously not flying cars and stuff like that, which is probably not that far away. Do you think we would be further along, or does that surprise you at all?
Yeah, I'm surprised. I graduated from high school in 1960. So here I am, 60 years later. Now, maybe you had this experience too. When you graduated from high school and you thought, oh my God, 60 years ago from now, how did that feel? Did that feel like, oh, it could have been the Middle Ages? Or did it feel like, oh, it could have been yesterday?
I was in high school without a cell phone, so even college without a cell phone. It's just that stuff you never even thought. Like my mom had a car phone, but you start to go back and think like if you could, when Nate Bargatze, great comedian, talks about like if I went back in time, I don't even know if I'd be able to prove I was from the future because he wouldn't be able to explain all this stuff that's happening and how stuff works. And just like, yeah, it just kind of works. You just kind of can call someone, you know.
Well, exactly. We're on the same wavelength. So I'm just saying, when I graduated from high school, when I would think 60 years back, that would have been, 1900. Now, 1900, we still have, movie clips of people walking around in 1900, the early days of movies, but it seemed like ancient times. But now, here I am. I'm 82. I look back 60 years back to when I was 22. Yes, there's been change, but it doesn't seem at all as dramatic as it was in the past. So the reason for this story is that the dramatic nature of change has slowed down. Why? Because clothing is not terribly different than it was 60 years ago. Cars, yes, they're much more modern, sleeker, more expensive, but we still have 4 rubber tires on them. You can get different colors. Cars are sort of the same. Houses are sort of the same. But the things that are different are like cell phones, and what you can do on it. And now here we are with computers. That's a tremendous change. And now we have AI on our doorstep. It's like a little baby. And that's really what it is. The way we're experiencing AI today is a baby. It's like Henry Ford's Model T is what we're at with AI. And look where we are with cars now compared to the Model T.
Is AI going to do more good than
the nature
bad?
Of change, well, by definition, if we survive the next 40 years, it will have done more good than bad. If we don't survive, then we can blame AI.
Yeah, well, that'll be interesting to see. It's like something out of a movie, and they've done movies on it already so far. Some interesting movies about robots and AI, and
that's a good illustration.
Stuff that could be real. Stuff that could be real. Now, you would have thought if you watched it 20 years ago, you would never have thought.
Well, exactly. That's a very good observation because it tells us what the value of fiction is. Fiction gets us accustomed to moving into the future, at least science fiction. And in a way, I'm going to come back to the chyron that's floating across the bottom of everybody's screen here. Usability consultant and sci-fi author. Believe it or not, somebody actually wrote an article within the last 3 months about the value of usability people reading science fiction. Usability people are creating the future by designing computer systems and the interface for computer systems, and also deciding what people need for computing. So in that context, the two things do go together. And the value of movies, as you just said, is to help people get accustomed to what could be happening in the future, including things like an asteroid aiming towards Earth. So we got to get all these oil rig drillers up on an asteroid so they can drill into the asteroid and plant an atomic bomb, blow it apart.
It's like they say, sometimes truth is stranger than fiction, right? Where can we find your books?
So these novels are published on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. Just type in the word Thrall Conspiracy, and here's my little plug, Thrall Conspiracy. And this is a giant who lives up near the North Pole, and he was in charge of saving the microbial spores that would bring health and happiness to humans. And he was keeping them in storage because the bad aliens had convinced him that he should keep them in storage. But our hero and heroine were able to convince him to change sides and support the good aliens and as well as the hero, and help humanity by releasing those spores. And that was part of the solution. And the other part of the solution I will leave as a mystery for our listeners, because it's actually pretty exciting when you read about it.
Yep. Well, you can find on Amazon. Here is the link, or check out the website. Really appreciate your time here on the Wolff Den. We're going to let you go with the same question that everybody gets. You could spend 24 hours with anybody in the world. They have to be alive, and you can't be related to them. Who would you choose, and what would you guys do?
Yeah, if I could spend 24 hours with anybody, I'm trying not to think too hard because that goes down a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
I'd like to spend my time with Taylor Swift. She is a cultural force. Yep. She's a cultural force. How is it that she is getting so much attention? The economy of a state or a country, if she's going in foreign countries, gets a boost by her presence. And something going with her. She's tuned in. Her music, her lyrics get people excited. I would like to find out, what makes her tick. And
powerful women in entertainment. One of the most powerful people in entertainment.
Well, exactly. And I think she's sincere. People can be somewhat phony. They put on a presentation to get their brand going, But I don't know. How do you feel? I think Taylor Swift is actually sincere.
I like her. I don't know. I don't know if she is or she isn't. I know, actors, entertainers.
Yeah, well,
a certain way, but it'd be great to be able to spend the time with them and get to know, really understand whether or not they are or they aren't. She would be a great choice. I don't even know if she's ever been picked 300. I think she probably has to have been. I got to go back and check, but it's a great choice. It's definitely an interesting choice. Check out on Amazon the books Thrall Conspiracy and the sequel. And we look forward to seeing what comes next. Hopefully seeing this on the big screen.
Great to see you, Matt. It's been a fun conversation, let me tell you.
I appreciate it. We'll be back with more Wolff Den coming up soon. In the meantime, enjoy your day and night and do something good and fun. And we'll talk to you soon. Thanks.